She was invisible. For 5 years, Lady Seraphina Croft had been a fixture at every London ball, and a fixture in the same exact spot, the hard, gilt-edged chair in the corner, just beyond the glow of the main chandelier. She was the traitor's daughter, a living ghost haunting the edges of high society. Tonight was no different. The whispers followed her, the mocking glances stung, and the most beautiful woman in the room, Lady Beatrix, had just called her a limping charity case. But then the music stopped, the crowd parted, and the most feared man in England, Alistair Cain, the scarred Duke of Morrington, crossed the floor. He stopped directly in front of her, and in the dead silence, he whispered, "Dance with me." The ballroom at Almack's, the most exclusive social club in London, was a dizzying kaleidoscope of silk, diamonds, and ambition. For Lady Seraphina Croft, it was a prison. This night marked the start of her 5th, and surely final, season. 5 years of sitting. 5 years of being the living embodiment of her family's disgrace. Her father, the Earl of Alnwick, had died accused of the highest crime, treason. He'd supposedly sold military secrets to Napoleon's spies. The evidence was damning, his death swift, and the family's ruin absolute. Their estates were seized, their titles stripped. Only a small mortgaged townhouse in a less fashionable street remained, along with her father's crushing debts, all of which had fallen to Seraphina and her chaperone, her aunt, Lady Hester. If the scandal wasn't enough, there was her leg. A riding accident at 12 had left her with a permanent, pronounced limp. In a society that prized physical perfection in its women, this made her doubly unmarriageable. She was damaged goods, inside and out. "At least try to look pleasant, Seraphina," Lady Hester hissed from the chair beside her. Hester, a woman whose own social aspirations had been dashed by Seraphina's scandal, saw the girl as her last, failing investment. No man wants a sour-faced wallflower. Seraphina kept her gaze fixed on the dancers, her back straight. "I am pleasant, aunt. I am simply not deluded. No one is looking." "They are all looking," Hester snapped, her fan fluttering nervously. It was true. They were looking, but not with interest, with pity, with scorn. She could hear the whispers behind the fans. The traitor's daughter, still trying, and that limp, dreadful. The worst of them was Lady Beatrix Fenwick. Beatrix was the daughter of Lord Fenwick, the very man who had risen to political prominence after exposing Seraphina's father. Beatrix was everything Seraphina was not. Golden, flawless, and adored. She and her coterie drifted past the wallflower's corner. "Oh, Lady Seraphina," Beatrix said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "Still here? I must admire your persistence. And that gown, is that not the same silk from, let me think, 1810? Her friends tittered. Seraphina met her gaze, her own eyes a cool, steady grey. "It is, Lady Beatrix. Much like your wit, it is serviceable, if uninspired." Beatrix's smile faltered, her eyes flashing with malice. "You insolent!" But her insult was cut short. A sudden, palpable hush fell over the grand ballroom. The orchestra, sensing the shift, seemed to quiet. The dancers slowed, turning as one toward the grand entryway. He had arrived. Alistair Cain, the Duke of Morrington. He was a man forged in the fires of the Peninsular War. He was impossibly tall, broad-shouldered, and moved with a lethal grace that was more predator than aristocrat. A jagged scar ran from his left temple down his jaw, a stark white line against his sun-darkened skin. He was brutally handsome, terrifyingly rich, and utterly reclusive. The Tun called him the Reaper of Badajoz, whispered that he had killed 12 men with his bare hands, and that his first wife had thrown herself from a window just to escape him. He had not attended a ball in 3 years. Mothers physically shoved their daughters forward. Beatrix herself struck a pose, her expression shifting to one of sultry invitation. The Duke ignored them all. His dark, piercing eyes scanned the room, bypassing the glittering debutantes, the powerful politicians, the fawning hostesses. His gaze swept over the dance floor, over the orchestra, and settled with unnerving intensity on the wallflowers corner. He looked past the other hopeful, forgotten women. He looked directly at Serafina. Time seemed to stop. Serafina felt a strange, cold dread mixed with a burning spark of something. Confusion? He couldn't be looking at her? He was. With deliberate, unhurried steps, Alistair Cain crossed the vast, polished floor. The crowd parted for him, as if he were Moses parting the Red Sea. The whispers died completely. The only sound was the click of his polished boots on the parquet. He passed Beatrix without a glance. He passed Lady Hester, who looked as if she might faint. He stopped directly in front of Serafina's chair. She stared up at him, her heart hammering against her ribs. He was even more imposing up close. The scar was fearsome, but his eyes were not cruel. They were assessing and tired. He bowed, a curt, correct motion that held no subservience. The silence was so profound, his voice, though low, carried through the entire room. Lady Serafina Croft, dance with me. If the Duke's arrival had caused a hush, his request caused a collective, audible gasp. Lady Hester's fan dropped to the floor with a clatter. Lady Beatrix's face, which had been arranged in a perfect smile of expectation, contorted into a mask of pure, unadulterated fury. Serafina was frozen. This had to be a joke, a cruel, public humiliation orchestrated by the most powerful man in the room. He would offer his hand, and when she took it, he would recoil, perhaps making a comment about her father's traitorous blood. She looked up at his scarred face, searching for the malice, the mockery. She found none. He simply waited, his gloved hand extended, his expression unreadable. "Your Grace," she murmured, her voice hoarse. "You must be mistaken. I do not dance." "You do not, or you are not asked," he replied, his voice still low, meant only for her. "It amounts to the same thing." "Not tonight." He did not move his hand. "Dance with me, Lady Serafina." It was not a request. It was a command, spoken with the quiet authority of a man used to total obedience. Slowly, placing her hand in his, Serafina felt the strength of his grip. He did not pull her up. He simply provided a solid, unmoving anchor for her to rise on her own. As she stood, she put her weight on her good leg first, a subtle, practiced movement to hide her limp. He noticed. "I am aware of your injury, madam. I am not made of glass, and neither, I suspect, are you. You will not break me." With that, he guided her onto the floor. The orchestra, seeing the Duke and his chosen partner in place, struck up a waltz, and as if by silent decree, every other couple on the floor moved to the absolute edges, leaving the vast, gleaming center for the Duke and the wallflower. Serafina was rigid with terror. She had learned to dance, of course, but it had been years, and with her limp, the fluid, turning motion of the waltz was a nightmare. She stumbled on the first step. Instantly, his hand tightened on her waist. He was not holding her like a delicate flower. He was supporting her, taking a fraction of her weight, his movements impossibly strong and sure. "Follow my lead, Lady Serafina. Do not think about your feet. Think about mine," he murmured, his voice a low rumble near her ear. And she did. He was a magnificent dancer, a soldier's economy of movement combined with an aristocrat's grace. He adjusted his steps to match hers, compensating for her limp so subtly that, for the first time in her life, The movement felt less like a stumble and more like a glide. They were a strange, magnetic pair, the scarred warrior and the broken dove, moving as one in the center of a silent, staring room. "You have shocked them all, Your Grace," Seraphina said, finding her voice. She refused to be a simpering, grateful mouse. He had chosen her for a reason. She would not shame him with weakness. "The ton is a flock of sheep," he replied, his eyes never leaving hers. "It is good to remind them who the wolf is. And what am I in this metaphor? The lamb being led to slaughter?" A flicker of something, was it amusement, sparked in his dark eyes. "You have been sitting in that chair for 5 years, Lady Seraphina. You have endured whispers that would have driven most women to the country or to laudanum. You are no lamb." They waltzed in silence for another minute, the only sound the scrape of their feet and the swell of the music. "Why me, Your Grace?" she finally had to ask. "You could have any woman in this room. Why choose the one who brings you nothing but scandal and pity?" His expression darkened slightly. "I do not deal in pity, and I despise the men who flock to the likes of Lady Beatrix. I chose you, Lady Seraphina, because I knew your father." Seraphina's blood ran cold. She missed a step, and he held her fast. You knew my father." "I served under his command. Before he was an earl, he was a colonel, and he was the finest, most honorable officer I ever knew." "He was a traitor," Seraphina whispered, the word tasting like ash. "Was he?" The Duke's gaze was intense, burning. "He taught you to play chess, did he not? He taught you strategy. Tell me, did he ever strike you as a fool?" "Never," she said instantly. "He was the cleverest man I ever knew." "Exactly. And only a fool would have been caught the way he was. Or," he spun her in a slow, controlled turn, "a man who was betrayed by someone he trusted." The music came to its gentle conclusion. They stopped in the center of the floor. The Duke held her gaze for 1 moment longer, a silent question passing between them. Then he bowed deeply. Seraphina curtsied, her mind reeling. He escorted her back to her chair. Lady Hester looked positively ill. The Duke raised Seraphina's hand, not to his lips, but simply holding it for a second. "Your father was a good man," he said, loud enough for those nearby, including a seething Beatrix, to hear. "It is a shame his memory has been so poorly served." And with that, he turned on his heel and strode from the ballroom, leaving absolute chaos in his wake. The next morning, Seraphina's world had been turned upside down. Before noon, no fewer than 12 calling cards had been delivered to their small townhouse. Gentlemen who had looked through her for 5 years were suddenly requesting an audience. Lady Hester was in a state of near delirium, torn between triumph and terror. "The Duke of Morrington," she kept repeating, pacing the worn parlor carpet. "He danced with you. He spoke to you. Do you understand what this means, child? He has made you fashionable." "He has made me a curiosity, aunt," Seraphina corrected, staring out the window. "They are vultures, not suitors. They want to be close to the Duke's new pet." "Then be his pet!" Hester shrieked, clutching her head. "Just do not ruin this. This is our only chance." A sharp rap at the door silenced her. The housekeeper, Mrs. Croft's last loyal servant, entered carrying a single, thick cream envelope on a silver tray. It was sealed not with wax, but with a stark, black signet. The crest of the Duke of Morrington. It was not a calling card. It was a note. "Lady Seraphina, the air in ballrooms is foul. The air in Hyde Park is marginally better. Walk with me at 5. I will call for you. Morrington." It was, once again, a command. At 5 o'clock, precisely. The Duke's black lacquer carriage, bearing his crest and pulled by two magnificent black stallions, arrived. The entire street, usually so quiet, was filled with curious neighbors peering from behind their curtains. Serafina, wearing her best and only walking dress of a simple grey muslin, was handed into the carriage by the Duke himself. He did not speak, merely nodded, and they sat in silence as the carriage clattered toward Hyde Park. The fashionable hour, the park was thronged, and just as at the ball, the moment the Duke's carriage was spotted, a ripple of excitement went through the crowd. When he disembarked and turned to help Serafina down, the gossip mills began to churn at a furious pace. He offered his arm. She took it, and they began to walk, her limp more pronounced on the uneven turf. He slowed his long stride to match hers. "You have made me the most talked-about woman in London, Your Grace," she said quietly, her eyes fixed forward. "My name is Alistair," he said, "and you were already the most talked-about woman in London. They merely changed the topic of conversation from your ruin to your rise." "And which is this?" "That," he said, "depends on you." He steered them toward a more secluded path, away from the worst of the crowds. "I told you I knew your father. I did not tell you I was with him the week before his arrest." Serafina stopped, turning to face him. "What? You never said—" "The trial. I was shipped off to India on a diplomatic mission I never requested. Convenient. By the time I returned, your father was dead, and his name was Mudd. I have spent the last year, since my return, looking into the matter." You believe he was innocent?" she whispered, daring to voice the hope she had crushed for 5 long years. "I know he was. The man who accused him, the man whose career was made by your father's fall, is Lord Fenwick." Serafina felt the blood drain from her face. "Beatrix's father, the very same," Alistair said, his voice hard as granite. "Fenwick was in charge of procurement. Your father had discovered massive discrepancies in the payroll. Gold meant for soldiers that was vanishing. Your father was building a case against him. And then, suddenly, a French courier was captured with plans in your father's handwriting. It was a forgery," Serafina breathed. "He was framed." "He was. But Fenwick was meticulous. He destroyed every piece of evidence, every letter, every ledger. He ruined your father, took his lands, and built his political empire on the grave of an honorable man. Why are you telling me this?" Serafina's hands were trembling. "Why involve me? This is dangerous. This is treason, Your Grace. Alistair." "Because I despise injustice," he said, his scarred face a mask of cold fury. "And because I believe you have the key. I have nothing. They took everything." "Not everything," he said, his gaze softening for the first time. "Your father taught you chess. He gave you a gift just before he was arrested. Did he not? A parting gift." Serafina's mind flew back. The last time she saw him, the guards were at the door. He had been hurried, his face pale, but his eyes calm. He had pressed something small and hard into her hand. He gave me a chess piece," she whispered, her eyes wide, "from his favorite set, the White Queen. He said, 'The Queen protects the King, Serafina. Always.' I thought he was just saying goodbye." Alistair's face was alight with a grim, fierce triumph. "He wasn't saying goodbye, Serafina. He was giving you the evidence." Just then, a voice called out, sickeningly sweet. "Your Grace, Lady Serafina, what a charming surprise." Lady Beatrix Fenwick was bearing down on them, her father, the portly and smiling Lord Fenwick, on her arm. "Morrington," Fenwick said, with a politician's oily charm. "Good to see you out. And with the lovely Lady Seraphina, a true act of Christian charity, bringing the poor girl into the sun. Seraphina flinched, but Alistair's hand covered hers where it rested on his arm. "Fenwick," Alistair said, his voice a low growl. "We were just discussing old campaigns, the ones in Spain. You remember them, don't you? Where so much was lost." Lord Fenwick's smile twitched. The colour drained from his face. He saw for the first time not a duke, but an enemy. I'm not sure I follow," Fenwick stammered. "No?" Alistair smiled, a terrifying expression that did not reach his eyes. "You will." He tipped his hat to a speechless Beatrix. "Ladies, Lord Fenwick." He turned, leading a stunned Seraphina away, leaving the most powerful politician in the park trembling in his wake. They returned to Seraphina's townhouse in a state of high tension. Mrs. Croft, the housekeeper, was waiting, her face pale. "My lady, your aunt, Lady Hester, she's in the parlour, and she's agitated." Lady Hester was indeed agitated. She was pacing, her face blotchy. "Where were you? The entire ton is saying you were walking with him. With the Duke. Seraphina, you must tell me everything he said." Seraphina looked at Alistair. He gave a subtle, warning shake of his head. "He was polite, Aunt. We discussed the weather. And my father." Hester's eyes darted nervously. "Your father? Why? Why dredge that up? It's in the past. You must not speak of it. You will ruin everything." "On the contrary, madam," Alistair said, stepping into the room. Lady Hester gasped, not having seen him. "We believe speaking of the Earl is the only way to correct the record." "Your Grace!" Hester curtsied so low she nearly fell. I had no idea. You honour our humble home." "I am here for one thing," Alistair said, ignoring her fawning. "Lady Seraphina, the chess piece." Seraphina, her heart pounding, hurried to her small bedchamber. In a worn mahogany box, she kept the few mementos she had of her father, his ring, a lock of his hair, and a single, intricately carved ivory chess piece, the White Queen. She brought it back to the parlour. Alistair took it, his large, scarred hands surprisingly delicate. He examined the base. "He was a master of a strategy," Alistair murmured. "He taught me." He twisted the base of the Queen. A tiny click was heard, and the bottom fell away, revealing a small, hollow compartment. Lady Hester let out a choked sound. Inside was a tiny roll of parchment, so small it was barely visible. Alistair carefully extracted it with a pair of tweezers from his coat pocket. He unrolled it under the lamplight. It was not a confession. It was not a letter. It was a list, a series of numbers, dates, and a single name. L'évêque. "L'évêque," Seraphina whispered. "I've heard that name. He was the French courier, the one who was caught with the plans." "Correct," Alistair said, his face grim. "He was the key witness. He confessed that your father was his contact, and was then supposedly hanged for his trouble." "But if he was hanged—" "This," Alistair said, tapping the parchment, "is not a name. It's an address, a private box at Copley's Bank. L'évêque wasn't hanged, Seraphina. He was paid. And your father, bless his meticulous soul, found out where the payoff was hidden." "Copley's Bank," Seraphina said. "But we can't just walk in. Lord Fenwick would know. He has spies everywhere." "He does," Alistair agreed. "And he is arrogant. He believes his secret is buried with your father. He would never dream you would have the key." "So what do we do?" "We," Alistair said, "are going to a masquerade ball." Lady Hester looked frantic. "A ball? Now? But the bank?" "Lord Fenwick is hosting a grand masquerade tonight," Alistair explained. "It is the event of the season. He will be there. His daughter will be there. All of his political allies will be there. It is the one night he will be distracted, his guard down, his focus entirely on his own social triumph. And while he is distracted, Serafina finished, a thrill of dangerous understanding running through her. Precisely. "Mr. Davies," Alistair called. A quiet, unassuming man in a plain suit, who had apparently been waiting in the Duke's carriage, stepped into the hall. "My secretary. He is a master of calligraphy. He will forge an admittance writ to the bank's night vault. You and I, Lady Serafina, will be his guests." "This is madness," Lady Hester cried, wringing her hands. "It's illegal. It's... What will you wear?" Alistair looked at Serafina. The wallflower was gone. In her place was a woman with a fire in her eyes, a strategist's daughter about to make her first move. "He is the Reaper, is he not?" Serafina said, a slow, dangerous smile touching her lips. "Then I shall go as Persephone, Queen of the Underworld." Alistair's scarred mouth quirked in a genuine smile. "Then we shall go to retrieve the secrets of the dead." Lady Hester watching them, backed against the wall, her face a mask of sudden, terrible fear. She looked from the determined Duke to her transformed niece and seemed to see her own world crumbling. I must get some air," she stammered, and grabbing her cloak, she fled the room, slamming the front door behind her. Serafina and Alistair looked at each other. "She is frightened," Serafina said. "She is," Alistair agreed. "But the question is, of what?" Fenwick House was ablaze with light, a monument to the very corruption that had built it. The theme was gods and monsters, and the Tun had embraced it with gaudy enthusiasm. Lord Fenwick himself, broad and sweating in a ridiculous golden Jupiter costume, accepted the fawning adulation of his guests. His daughter, Beatrix, was a passable if arrogant Aphrodite, surrounded by a court of lesser goddesses. At 10 o'clock, a ripple of excitement passed through the crowd. Two figures appeared at the top of the grand staircase. The Duke of Morrington was dressed as Hades. He wore no mask, only a severe, impeccably cut suit of the blackest wool, with a dark red waistcoat. His scarred face was more mask than any costume. At his side, Serafina was breathtaking. She wore a gown of deep pomegranate red, her hair woven with dark jewels. A delicate black lace mask covered her eyes, but there was no mistaking the proud set of her jaw or the woman on the Reaper's arm. "Morrington," Fenwick boomed, approaching them, "and Lady Serafina, you honor me." "Fenwick," Alistair said, his voice flat, "your home is impressive, built on solid foundations. One hopes." Fenwick's smile tightened. "Only the best, Your Grace. Only the best." Beatrix slithered to Alistair's side. "Your Grace, I had no idea you were coming. And Lady Serafina, what a novel costume. Are you meant to be a warning?" "I am, Lady Beatrix," Serafina replied, her voice clear and cold. "I am a reminder that all debts are paid. Eventually." Beatrix recoiled as if slapped. Alistair gave Serafina's arm a squeeze. "It is time. Mr. Davies is waiting." Under the cover of a string quartet, starting a new piece, they slipped away from the main ballroom and out a side terrace door. The Duke's black carriage was waiting in a dark alley, a street over. Mr. Davies, the secretary, was inside, looking pale. "The writ is prepared, Your Grace. The night warden at Copley's is amenable to persuasion. He believes we are retrieving sensitive state documents on behalf of the Crown." Copley's bank was a fortress of stone and shadow. The night warden, a nervous man named Tallow, bowed low to the Duke, his eyes wide with fear and greed. Alistair had clearly persuaded him well. "The vault, Your Grace. This way." The air was cold, smelling of dust and old money. They were led to a wall of brass boxes. Alistair produced the small, strange key from the chess piece. He inserted it into the box, marked L'évêque. With a heavy thunk, the lock turned. Alistair pulled the long metal box free and carried it to a table. He opened the lid. It was full. There were stacks of letters, bound in ribbon. There was a ledger, and there were bags of gold. Seraphina's hands trembled as she untied the first bundle of letters. The handwriting was unmistakable. Lord Fenwick's. It was all there. The entire conspiracy. Letters from Fenwick to the French double agent, L'évêque, detailing the plot. He'd offer up the Earl of Alnwick as a sacrifice. He'd provide forged evidence. In exchange, L'évêque would confess and receive a new life and a fortune, the very gold sitting in this box. And there, at the bottom, was the ledger, detailing the money Fenwick had been stealing for years. He did it, Seraphina whispered, tears blurring her vision. My father. He's innocent. We have it, Seraphina. We have him, Alistair said, his voice thick with triumph. Not quite. A new voice echoed in the vault. Seraphina and Alistair spun around. Blocking the vault's exit was not Lord Fenwick. It was Lady Hester. Her face was ashen, her hands trembling, and behind her stood two large, brutal-looking men in dark livery, Fenwick's men. Aunt Hester. No, Seraphina breathed, the betrayal a cold knife in her gut. I'm sorry, Seraphina, I truly am, Hester whimpered. But what choice did I have? Lord Fenwick. He knows about my debts, the gambling. He was going to have me thrown in prison. So you spied on your own niece, Alistair growled, moving to stand in front of Seraphina. He promised to clear them. He promised to find my own daughter a good match if I just watched you. I didn't know you would find this, she shrieked, pointing at the box. When I left the house today, I went straight to him. I told him about the chess piece. You fool, Alistair snarled. He will never honour a promise to a traitor. Give me the box, Your Grace, one of the men said, stepping forward, his hand on a cudgel. Lord Fenwick will be most grateful. He will, Alistair agreed. He looked at the box, then at Seraphina, then back at the men. And I am a generous man. In one blindingly fast motion, Alistair grabbed one of the heavy bags of gold from the box and threw it full force at the first man's head. The man crumpled with a sickening crack. Run, Seraphina! Davies, the carriage! Alistair shouted, grabbing the ledger and the most damning bundle of letters. The second man lunged. Alistair met him, not as a duke, but as the reaper of Badajoz. It was not a fight. It was a brutal, efficient dismantling. But as Alistair disabled the man, Lady Hester, in a fit of panic, grabbed a heavy inkwell from the warden's desk and threw it. Alistair turned, shoving Seraphina out of the way. The inkwell glanced off his temple. He stumbled, but grabbed Seraphina's hand, pulling her from the vault. Go, go! He yelled, shoving her toward Davies. They scrambled into the carriage, Alistair bleeding freely from the gash on his head. Behind them, Lady Hester screamed, Take it! Take the rest! Just say I tried. They heard the carriage door slam, the horses rear, and the crack of the whip. They were safe. But the box, with the bulk of the letters and all the gold, was still in the vault with her treacherous aunt. Alistair slumped against the seat, pressing a handkerchief to his head, his eyes closed. Well, he breathed. That could have gone better. They raced back to Morrington House, the Duke's grand, silent mansion. A physician was roused, and Alistair's head was stitched and bandaged. He sat in his study, a glass of brandy in his good hand, his face like a thundercloud. Seraphina paced the library, her heart broken. She betrayed us. She betrayed him. My father. It's all for nothing, Alistair. She'll have given Fenwick the rest of the letters. He'll destroy them. It's our word against his, and we have nothing." "We do not have nothing," Alistair said, his voice a low growl. He gestured to the table. There lay the single bundle of letters he had managed to grab, and the ledger. "We have this." "It's not enough," Seraphina cried. "It's a start, but it's not the full confession. Fenwick will say you forged it. He'll say you're obsessed, that you're trying to ruin him." "He will," Alistair agreed, "which is why we are not going to the Prince Regent. We are not going to the courts." "Then what? What is left?" Alistair looked up, and the grim, dangerous smile she had seen in the park returned. "We are going back to the ball." "What? Alistair, you're injured. And they know. They know we have something. They do not know what. Fenwick is arrogant. He believes he has the upper hand because he has the box. He will be at his party, celebrating his victory, assuming I am licking my wounds." "But what can we do?" "Your father taught you chess, Seraphina. You never win by attacking the king directly when he is surrounded by his pieces. You win by forcing him to move into a trap." He stood, wincing only slightly. "And I have just the trap in mind." He went to his desk and pulled out a single sheet of paper. "Mr. Davies," he called. The secretary, still pale, appeared. "Your skills will be needed once more. I need you to copy this. Perfectly." Seraphina looked at the paper. It was one of Fenwick's letters. But it wasn't. The handwriting was identical. The seal was perfect, but the words were different. It was a letter, supposedly from Fenwick, directing payment not to L'évêque, but to Lord Ashworth, Fenwick's main political rival. "Alistair, this is a forgery," she whispered. "It is," he said calmly. "Your father's name was ruined by a forgery. It is only fitting that his honor be restored by one. This is the bait." Fenwick House was still in full swing. The guests were drunk on champagne and gossip. When the Duke of Morrington and Lady Seraphina reappeared, a fresh wave of shock went through the room. Alistair's white bandage was a stark contrast to his black attire. Seraphina was pale but resolute, her hand firmly on his arm. They saw Fenwick, surrounded by politicians. He was laughing, a glass of wine in his hand. When he spotted them, his laughter faltered, his eyes widening in shock and rage. Lady Hester was nowhere to be seen. "Morrington!" Fenwick blustered, striding towards them. "I thought you had retired for the evening. An accident, I see." "A minor disagreement," Alistair said, his voice carrying in the sudden lull. "Fenwick, we need to speak. Privately." "I have nothing to say to you." "Oh, I think you do. We found the box, Fenwick." The color drained from the politician's face. The entire ballroom was now watching. I don't know what you're talking about," Fenwick stammered. "The box. At Copley's. The one belonging to a Mr. L'évêque," Alistair said, his voice like ice. "The one with the letters. And the gold." "This is an outrage," Fenwick yelled, his voice rising. "You are mad. You dare accuse me." "I accuse you of nothing," Alistair said smoothly. "In fact, I am here to apologize. It seems I misunderstood the situation." A confused murmur went through the crowd. Fenwick looked baffled. "You apologize?" "Yes. You see, when we opened the box, we found the most extraordinary thing. We found this." Alistair produced the single, forged letter from his coat. "A letter from you, yes, but directing payment to Lord Ashworth. It seems he was the traitor all along, and you were merely the one who caught him. You've been protecting his secret all these years. How noble." Fenwick stared at the letter. He was trapped. He could see it was a forgery. But if he said it was a forgery, he would have to explain how he knew what the real letters said. Seraphina watched, her heart in her throat. This was the gambit, Fenwick saw his opening. "Yes," he boomed. "Yes, exactly. Ashworth. It was Ashworth. I kept it secret to protect the crown from scandal. But this proves it. You see, Morrington, you have done the nation a service." He snatched the letter from Alistair's hand, his face alight with manic relief. He was going to frame his rival. He held the letter up for all to see. "You see this? Proof. Lord Ashworth is the traitor." "Indeed," Alistair said, his voice suddenly hard as steel. "And I see you have the other letters as well? The ones your men and Lady Hester retrieved from the bank not an hour ago?" Fenwick froze. "The letters," Alistair continued, his voice resonating with command, "that detail your plot to frame the Earl of Alnwick. The letters I had my secretary, Mr. Davies, make copies of this afternoon. The ledger, which I have right here." He produced the real ledger from his other pocket. Fenwick looked at the forged letter in his hand, then at the real ledger in Alistair's, and he understood. He had been played. By publicly accepting the forgery, he had publicly admitted he knew about the bank box. He had confirmed the conspiracy existed. You trapped me," Fenwick whispered, his face crumbling. "You trapped yourself, Fenwick," Alistair said. "You were so eager to blame another, you confirmed your own guilt." Lady Beatrix screamed, "Father! What is he saying?" But it was too late. The ton surged, the politicians backing away from Fenwick as if he had the plague. "Treason!" someone whispered. "He framed Alnwick!" "Guards!" someone shouted from the back. Fenwick looked around, his eyes wild. He saw Seraphina, watching him not with hatred, but with a cold, righteous pity. And he saw the Duke, his face scarred and bandaged, looking every inch the Reaper, come to collect his due. Fenwick collapsed, the forged letter fluttering from his hand. The trap had sprung. The world stopped. Lord Fenwick, his face a grotesque mask of apoplectic rage and disbelief, clutched the forged letter in his hand. The real ledger, which Alistair now held aloft, was his death warrant, and the laughter in the ballroom had curdled into a collective, horrified gasp. You trapped me," Fenwick whispered, the sound barely audible over the ringing in his own ears. "You trapped yourself, Fenwick." Alistair's voice was like ice, cutting through the silence. "You were so eager to blame another, so desperate to seize your opportunity, you confirmed your own guilt before the entire ton." "Father!" Lady Beatrix shrieked, her voice cracking. She lunged forward, not in defense, but in a blind panic. "Father, tell them it's a lie! Tell them!" But Fenwick only stared at Seraphina. The wallflower. The ghost. The insignificant, limping girl who had just, with the quiet precision of a master, checkmated a king. His hatred, raw and toxic, was the only thing holding him upright. You wench," he spat. "You will hang for this." "No, Fenwick," Seraphina said, her voice clear and strong, resonating with 5 years of suppressed fury and grief. "You will. For my father." From the main doorway, a new voice of authority cut through the tension. "Robert Fenwick," announced the captain of the City Watch, flanked by 4 grim-faced constables. Mr. Davies, Alistair's secretary, stood behind them, having clearly fetched them the moment the trap was sprung. "You are under arrest for high treason, fraud, and conspiracy against the crown." The room exploded. Ladies screamed, men shouted, backing away from Fenwick as if he were a leper. The constables moved in, their hands grabbing the politician's arms. The spell of his power, so absolute just minutes before, was shattered. He was no longer a lord, he was a common criminal. "Get your hands off me," he roared, struggling as they bound his wrists. "I am Lord Fenwick. I am a friend of the regent." "You are a traitor," Alistair said, handing the ledger to the captain. "And your friends have already scattered." It was true. The politicians who had surrounded him all night were now pressed against the far walls, their faces pale, desperately trying to appear as if they had never met the man. Beatrix had collapsed onto a settee, her sobs hysterical, her goddess costume now looking like a pathetic, tawdry joke. As they dragged Fenwick from his own ballroom, his eyes locked with Seraphina's one last time. "Ruin!" he screamed, his voice echoing down the marble hall. "You are ruin! You will die alone! You will—" The heavy oak doors slammed shut, cutting off his curse. The music did not restart. The ball was over. Alistair, his bandaged head held high, his face a mask of grim satisfaction, placed Seraphina's hand on his arm. He did not lead her out. He led her through the crowd, and this time they parted for her. Not in pity, not in fear, but in stunned, silent awe. The subsequent month was not a whirlwind. It was a deluge. The trial of Lord Fenwick was the most sensational event of the decade. The public, who had once jeered the Earl of Alnwick's name, now clamoured for his executioner's head. Seraphina, dressed in mourning black for the father she could finally, publicly grieve, took the stand. She did not weep. She did not raise her voice. With chilling clarity, she recounted her father's integrity, presented the chess piece, the White Queen, to the court, and explained his final, desperate message. She was the picture of wronged nobility, and the courtroom was silent. Alistair Kane, the Duke of Morrington, testified next. He presented the military ledgers, the coded correspondence he and his men had uncovered, and the meticulous chain of evidence that proved Fenwick had not only framed the Earl, but had been stealing from the crown for a decade. His word as the reaper of Badajoz and a man who answered to no one was iron. The final, most pathetic witness was Lady Hester. Brought before the court, her usual finery replaced with a drab brown dress, she was a broken woman. She tried to lie, to paint herself as a victim, but Mr. Davies calmly produced her own correspondence with Fenwick, detailing the sums of money she'd been paid for reporting on her niece's every move. "Why?" Seraphina, from the gallery, whispered the word, though she did not mean to. Hester heard her. She looked up, her eyes wild with shame and terror. "He had my debts!" she shrieked at the judges. "The gambling! I was ruined! He promised to clear them. What was I to do? What choice did I have?" The head magistrate's voice was cold. "You had the choice of honour, madam. You chose treason." The verdict was swift. Robert Fenwick was found guilty on all counts. He was stripped of his titles, his lands, his name. He was sentenced not to a quick death by hanging, but to transportation for life. He would live out his days in the penal colony of Botany Bay, a living death from which no one returned. Lady Hester, for her role, was found complicit. Her own small assets were seized, and she was publicly disgraced, sentenced to internal exile, forbidden from ever setting foot in London again. As for Lady Beatrix, she was not charged with a crime, but her fate, in the eyes of the ton, was worse. Her engagement was broken. Her family's name was synonymous with disgrace. Seraphina saw her one last time, trying to enter Almack's. The doorman, who had once bowed to her, simply shook his head and shut the grand white doors in her face. The Queen of the Ton had become a ghost, just as she had tried to make Seraphina. A week later, Seraphina stood before the Prince Regent himself. In a small, formal ceremony, he personally handed her the royal decree. Her father's name was officially, publicly cleared. His titles, his honours, and his lands were restored. Seraphina was no longer Lady Seraphina. She was Seraphina Croft, the Countess of Alnwick in her own right. She travelled to Alnwick Park the next day. She hadn't seen her ancestral home since she was a child. The Crown, having seized it, had let it fall into disrepair. The gardens were overgrown, the windows shuttered. But as her simple carriage, not the Duke's but her own, rolled up the long gravel drive, the great front doors opened. Lined up on the steps was the skeleton staff who remained. Old Mrs. Croft, her former housekeeper, was at the front, her hands clasped, tears streaming down her face. "My lady," the old woman whispered, curtsying low. We kept the fires lit. We always knew he was a good man. We knew you'd come home." Seraphina stepped down from the carriage, her limp pronounced on the uneven stones. She looked at the faces of the people who had not abandoned her father, and for the first time since the trial began, she wept. This was her victory. Not the trial, not the disgrace of her enemies. This, her home, her name. The final ball of the season was held at the Duchess of Richmond's estate. When the doors opened and the majordomo announced, "The Right Honourable Seraphina, Countess of Alnwick," the orchestra, mid-waltz, faltered and stopped. Every head in the glittering ballroom turned. She stood in the entryway, not in the shadows, but in the full, glorious light of the chandeliers. She wore a gown of striking emerald green, the Alnwick diamonds at her throat. Her hair was up, and her gaze was not defiant, but calm, assured, regal. The hush was absolute. This was not the traitor's daughter. This was not the limping charity case. This, the tongue whispered, was the Phoenix Countess, the woman who had risen from the ashes of her family's ruin and brought down the most powerful man in England. Then the Duke of Richmond himself crossed the floor, bowed low, and said, "My Lady Alnwick, may I have the honour?" The room exploded. Suddenly she was thronged. Men who had looked through her for 5 years now fell over themselves to beg for a dance. Her dance card, which had been empty for half a decade, was full in 30 seconds. She danced. She waltzed with the Duke. She quadrilled with a stammering viscount. Her limp was still there, a part of her, but she moved with a confidence that made it seem an eccentricity, not a flaw. She smiled, she was polite, but her eyes kept scanning the room. He was there. Alistair Cain stood near the terrace doors, just as he had at the Fenwick ball. He was not dancing. He was not mingling. He wore no bandage. All that remained of the fight was a faint, new line on his temple, joining the other honourable scars. He was watching her, and as their eyes met, the faintest, proudest smile touched his lips. After a perfunctory waltz with some baron, Seraphina excused herself, claiming a need for air. She moved past the fawning crowds, past the whispers of her name, and stepped out onto the cool, moonlit terrace. He was waiting. "You are not sitting, Lady Alnwick," he said, his voice a low rumble. She smiled, turning to face him. "I find I'm quite tired of dancing, Your Grace. It is exhausting, being so suddenly popular." "My name is Alistair," he said softly, stepping closer. The air on the terrace was intimate, quiet. "Alistair," she corrected herself. The name felt right. I can never repay you. You have given me back my father's name. You have given me back my life." "I did nothing, Seraphina," he said, taking her hand. His touch was warm, no longer just a support, but a caress. "You had the key. You had the courage. You were the one who had been playing the long game for 5 years. I merely cleared the board." He looked at her. His dark eyes, usually so guarded, now open and filled with an emotion that made her heart stop. "They look at you as if you are some prize. They do not see you. They see the Alnwick fortune." I know, she said quietly. They don't see the girl who sat in the corner. They don't see the anger or the grief. But you did. I see you, he said, his voice raw. I saw you when you were invisible. I saw you when you had nothing but your honor. That is the woman I am interested in. He touched his scarred temple. They called me the Reaper. A monster. I learned to be alone. I have no patience for the world you now command. Good, she whispered, stepping closer, her hand still in his. I have had enough of that world. I am interested in a man who saw me when I was invisible. A man who values honor above all. A man who is not afraid of a fight. A slow, genuine smile spread across his face, transforming his harsh features. I am returning to my estate in the north, Morrington. It is quiet and cold, and very far from all this noise. I hear the north is beautiful in the autumn, she replied, her gaze locked with his. It can be, he murmured, but it would be better with a queen. Her breath hitched. The White Queen, her father's last gift. A queen? She asked, her voice trembling. Your Grace, Alistair, I am only a countess. They call you the Phoenix Countess, he said, his other hand coming up to cup her face. But I think Duchess has a better ring to it. She looked up at this fierce, loyal, scarred man. And what does the Duchess get in return? Your Grace, you are the most feared man in England. What do you offer? I offer a man who will never, ever let you sit alone again, he said, his voice thick with devotion. I offer a partner, a fortress, my whole, damaged and fiercely loyal heart. That, Serafina whispered, rising on her toes, her limp forgotten, is a more than acceptable exchange. He lowered his head, and in the moonlight, the scarred duke kissed the former wallflower. It was not a polite society kiss. It was a kiss of equals, a kiss of fire and promise, a sealing of two souls who had been forged in disgrace and had found redemption in each other. She had sat alone for 5 years. She would never sit alone again. And so, the wallflower who had been ignored for 5 long years finally got her justice and her duke. Serafina's story is a powerful reminder that true strength isn't about being popular or perfect. It's about resilience. It's about biding your time, holding on to your honor when no one else will, and having the courage to make a move when the time is right. She and Alistair saw the truth in each other when the rest of the world saw only scars and scandal. They proved that karma, even if it takes 5 years, always finds its mark, and that the greatest victories often come from the shadows. What did you think of Serafina's White Queen's gambit? And what about that shocking betrayal by her aunt? Let me know your favorite part in the comments below. If you love stories of karma, justice, and romance where the underdog finally wins, please give this video a like and share it with someone who needs a good story. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss another real-life drama from our channel.